The Black Hawk lurched. Metal screamed. Tessa Morgan's world became fire and chaos, and the certainty of death rushing up from the Afghan desert at 150 miles per hour. Then her hands found the rifle, Sullivan's rifle, and everything changed. But that moment was still 72 hours away. 72 hours before Tessa would break the promise that had defined the last 6 years of her life. The promise she'd made to her mother standing in the rain at Arlington National Cemetery, watching them fold the flag that had draped her father's coffin. The morning sun hammered down on Forward Operating Base Griffin like a physical weight. September in Helmand Province meant temperatures pushing 115 degrees by noon. The air tasted like dust and diesel fuel, and the accumulated desperation of men living in a place that wanted them dead. Tessa sat in the dim coolness of the supply depot, her eyes scanning spreadsheets on a battered laptop that took 30 seconds to load each page. 7,200 rounds of 5.56mm NATO ammunition. Cataloged, verified, ready for distribution. The M240B machine gun belts were organized by lot number. The 50 caliber BMG rounds sat in their specialized containers, each one accounted for down to the last cartridge. Everything in its place. Everything documented with obsessive precision. This was what Tessa understood. Order, systems, predictability. She was 24 years old, originally from Butte, Montana, where her father had worked in the copper mines until a cave-in crushed 3 vertebrae in his lower back when she was 12. Her mother taught elementary school and stretched every dollar until it screamed. But that wasn't the whole truth. That was the story Tessa told people who asked about her childhood. The safe version, the one that didn't require her to talk about what came after the mine accident, after her father could no longer provide for his family through physical labor. The real story was different. Michael Morgan hadn't just been a miner. Before the accident, before Tessa was born, he'd been Staff Sergeant Michael Morgan, 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, 3 deployments, 2 Bronze Stars. A career cut short by a training accident that the Army classified as non-combat related, which meant reduced benefits and a medical discharge that left him scrambling for work in a Montana mining town. He taught Tessa to shoot when she was 10 years old, started her on a .22 caliber rifle plinking cans in the mountains behind their house. By 12, she was shooting her father's old M4. By 14, she could hit targets at 300 yards with iron sights. By 16, she understood ballistics and wind drift and how the Coriolis effect from Earth's rotation could shift bullets at extreme distances. Her father never explained why he was teaching her these things, just said that shooting was a skill worth having, that discipline and patience transferred to everything else in life. Then he deployed as a private security contractor to Afghanistan. The money was too good to refuse. 3 months of work paid more than a year in the mines, and his back was getting worse. He promised it would be 1 rotation, 6 months. Then he'd come home and they'd figure out something else. Tessa was 17 when the notification team came to their door. Staff Sergeant Michael Morgan, killed in action during an ambush outside Kandahar, protecting a convoy. Died doing what he'd always done, standing between danger and the people who needed him. Her mother broke, not visibly. Sarah Morgan was too strong for that, too practical. But something inside her shattered, and in the wreckage she made Tessa promise. They were standing in the rain at Arlington National Cemetery, 21-gun salute echoing across the white headstones, the honor guard folding the flag with mechanical precision. Her mother gripped Tessa's hand so hard it hurt. "Promise me," she whispered. "Promise me you'll never pick up a rifle again. I can't lose you the same way. I can't." Tessa had promised, kept that promise for 6 years, through the rest of high school, through the decision to join the Army because the family needed money and college wasn't an option, through basic training where she qualified with the M4 and never touched one again. She'd requested logistics, supply chain management, the furthest thing from combat she could find while still serving. And for 6 years that promise had held, until it didn't, but that was still 72 hours away. Tessa closed the laptop and wiped sweat from her forehead. Even in the shade, the heat was oppressive. She checked her watch. An hour until lunch in the mess hall. The mess hall smelled like industrial cleaner and overcooked meat. Tessa grabbed a tray of something that might have been chicken and found Daniel McKay sitting alone in the corner. The combat medic looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, the kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix. She sat down across from him without asking permission. "That's how it worked here. You didn't wait for invitations." Daniel looked up and managed a tired smile. "Inventory day. Every day is inventory day." Tessa poked at her chicken. It had the texture of rubber. "You look like hell," she said. "Medevac came in at 0300, IED casualty. Kid was 19. Daniel stared at his coffee. Couldn't save his legs. They ate in silence for a while. Tessa never knew what to say when Daniel talked about his work. Her job involved spreadsheets and climate-controlled storage. His involved blood and screaming and making impossible decisions about who lived and who didn't. Then Daniel set down his fork and looked at her with sudden intensity. You should learn more than just logistics. Tessa blinked. What? There are training opportunities on base, combat first aid, weapons handling, navigation. Most support personnel ignore them, but everyone should know how to defend themselves, how to help others in an emergency. I went through basic combat training. I know how to shoot. The lie came automatically. She knew far more than basic combat training, but acknowledging that meant talking about her father, about why she'd learned, about the promise. When was the last time you actually fired a weapon? Tessa thought about it. Basic training, 18 months ago. The only time since her father's funeral. That's what I thought. Daniel pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket and slid it across the table. Master Sergeant Briggs runs an optional program, Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Show up if you want to be more than just a name on a casualty list. He stood up, grabbed his tray, and walked away before Tessa could respond. She looked at the paper. Crude handwriting listed times and a location on the far side of the base. At the bottom, a single sentence. Every soldier holds the line when the moment demands it. Tessa folded the paper and put it in her pocket. She probably wouldn't go. She had inventory to manage, reports to file, and more importantly, she had a promise to keep. But that evening, after finishing her logistics duties, her feet carried her toward the coordinates Daniel had written down. The shooting range sat at the edge of the base, surrounded by blast barriers and overlooked by a guard tower. Even at 1800 hours, the heat was brutal. Tessa approached a small group of soldiers standing near a weapons rack. Most were younger than her, support personnel by the look of them. An older man stood facing them. He had to be in his late 60s, which made him ancient by military standards. His face was weathered and creased like old leather. Scars ran down both forearms. He walked with a slight limp favoring his left leg, but his eyes were sharp and alert. When he looked at Tessa, she felt evaluated and measured in about 3 seconds. You're new. His voice was gravelly, like he'd spent decades shouting over gunfire. Name, Tessa Morgan, logistics specialist. Briggs, Master Sergeant, retired. He walked to the weapons rack and pulled out an M4 carbine. You know how to shoot? I qualified in basic training. Another lie. But what was she supposed to say? That her father had trained her since she was 10? That she'd been shooting before most of these soldiers had joined up? That means nothing. Briggs handed her the rifle. It felt heavier than she remembered. Or maybe the weight was the promise she was about to break just by holding it. She could put it down, walk away, go back to counting bullets instead of firing them. But something in Briggs's eyes stopped her. A recognition. Like he could see something in her that she'd been hiding. This is an M4, 5.56 millimeter. Effective range 300 meters. You'll start here. Briggs spent the next 20 minutes going over fundamentals. How to load the magazine, how to achieve a proper sight picture, how to breathe before pulling the trigger. Tessa already knew all of this. Her father had drilled it into her 1,000 times, but she listened quietly, pretending it was new. Finally, Briggs pointed downrange at paper targets set at 100 yards. Show me what basic training taught you. Tessa positioned herself at the firing line. Her hands found the rifle's familiar weight. Muscle memory, 6 years old, but still there waiting. She pressed the rifle stock against her shoulder, found the front sight post. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Breathe, baby girl. Let half of it out. Hold. Squeeze, don't pull. She fired 5 rounds in careful succession. The rifle kicked against her shoulder with each shot. The smell of gunpowder filled her nostrils, bringing back memories she'd tried to bury. When she lowered the weapon, Briggs walked down range without comment. He examined her target, then turned back toward her. His expression was unreadable. He returned and took the rifle from her hands. Look at your grouping. Tessa squinted at the target. Her 5 shots had punched through the paper in a cluster about the size of her fist, all of them within a few inches of the center. Most beginners scatter rounds everywhere. Their hands shake. They flinch. They pull the trigger instead of squeezing it. Briggs looked at her with those sharp eyes. You did none of those things. Your grouping is tight. Your shots are controlled. He paused. You've shot before, more than basic training. It wasn't a question. Tessa felt her carefully constructed walls cracking. My father taught me, a long time ago. Your father, military ranger, killed in Afghanistan, 2007. Briggs nodded slowly like pieces were falling into place. You have natural talent, rare talent. That means you should develop it. I made a promise to my mother after my father died that I wouldn't, she trailed off. Wouldn't what? Wouldn't use the skills he gave you, wouldn't honor what he taught you. Briggs's voice was sharp. Your father gave you a gift. Refusing to use it doesn't bring him back. It just wastes what he left you. He started walking away, then stopped. Tuesday and Thursday, same time. If you want to honor your father's memory, you show up. If you want to hide from it, you stay in your supply depot. He left her standing there with the rifle in her hands and a decision to make. Tessa showed up on Tuesday and Thursday and every session after that. Over the following 3 weeks, the training became a rhythm she looked forward to. Her logistics work was important, but it was also monotonous. The shooting range was different. There was immediate feedback. Either the bullet went where she intended or it didn't. Briggs taught with quiet intensity, though Tessa suspected he knew she already understood most of it. He was testing her, seeing how far her skills went, how deep her father's training had run. By the second week, he introduced her to different weapon systems. The M240B machine gun, the M249 squad automatic weapon. Each one had different characteristics, different recoil patterns. Then in the third week, he brought out the M110 semi-automatic sniper system. The rifle sat on the bench like a piece of precision machinery, which is exactly what it was. Longer than the M4, heavier, a powerful scope mounted on top. Tessa stared at it. Her father had owned a civilian version of this rifle, had taught her on it when she was 15. Long-range shooting in the Montana mountains, hitting targets at distances that seemed impossible. 7.62 millimeter NATO, effective range 800 meters, semi-automatic. Briggs looked at her. Requires perfect trigger discipline. Any flinch gets magnified through the scope. He set up targets at 300 yards, tiny dots in the distance. Tessa settled behind the rifle. The scope brought the world into sharp focus. She could see individual staple holes in the paper target. Briggs's voice was calm beside her. Breathe slowly. Let half the breath out. Hold. Squeeze. But Tessa didn't need this instruction. Her body remembered, her father's training surfacing like muscle memory that had been waiting for this moment. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. The boom echoed across the desert. Through the scope, she watched the bullet punch through the paper. Dead center. She fired 9 more rounds. 9 more perfect hits. When she lowered the rifle, Briggs was quiet for a long time. Your father taught you this. Yes. And you've been pretending you didn't know how. I made a promise. To your mother. Yes. Briggs sat down on the bench, gestured for her to join him. I had a daughter, he said suddenly. She'd be about your age now, 24, 25. Tessa turned to look at him, surprised. He never talked about personal matters. Haven't spoken to her in 6 years. His voice was flat, but pain edged every word. She said I chose the army over family. Said I was never there when it mattered. She's probably right. He took a long drink from his water bottle. I gave the military 25 years. Deployed to Grenada in 83, Panama in 89, Desert Storm in 91. Came home with scars and stories. But I missed birthdays and graduations and every moment that actually mattered to her. Briggs turned to look at Tessa. His eyes were wet. My wife died of cancer in 2008. My daughter didn't even call to tell me until 3 days after the funeral. That's when I knew I'd failed at the things that were supposed to matter most. Why are you telling me this? Tessa asked quietly. Because you remind me of her. That same determination, that same quiet strength. He looked away. Teaching you feels like a second chance. Like maybe I can do right by someone even if I failed with her. The weight of that confession settled between them. Your father gave you skills, Briggs continued, skills that could save lives. Your mother made you promise not to use them because she was afraid. Fear is understandable, but it's not wisdom. He stood up stiffly. The question you need to ask yourself is this: if the moment comes when someone needs you to use those skills, will you hide behind a promise, or will you honor what your father actually taught you? He walked away before she could respond. Tessa sat alone as the sun set over the desert, thinking about her father, about the promise, about what honor actually meant. That night, she pulled out a notebook and wrote a letter she'd never send. Dear Mom, I'm sorry, I know what I promised. I know why you made me promise. But Dad didn't teach me to shoot so I could hide from what I'm capable of. He taught me so I could stand when standing mattered. If the moment comes, I'm going to break my promise. And I think Dad would understand even if you can't. I love you, but I can't be less than what I was trained to be. Tessa, she folded the letter and put it in her father's old field notebook, which she'd carried since his funeral, a reminder of who he'd been, who he'd raised her to be. Mid-October brought news of Operation Valkyrie. The briefing took place in a secured room with maps covering every wall. Tessa sat in the back with other support personnel, trying to make sense of the tactical overlays. Lieutenant James Porter stood at the front, SEAL team operator, the kind of soldier who made difficult look effortless. He explained the mission with clinical precision. Intelligence indicated a Taliban weapons cache 18 miles north of the base. High-value target confirmed on site. A 14-man SEAL team would insert by helicopter under cover of darkness. The mission required support personnel, someone to manage ammunition resupply, someone who could stay close to the action but wouldn't panic under pressure. Porter's eyes scanned the room. I need a volunteer from logistics, someone reliable who won't freeze up if things get complicated. Tessa's hand went up before she consciously decided to raise it. Porter nodded. Morgan, you're on the manifest. Report to the armory at 2200 hours tomorrow for gear issue. After the briefing, Briggs found her outside. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You don't have to do this. Logistics specialists aren't required to go outside the wire. I know, but they need someone reliable. Briggs studied her face, then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small leather notebook. The cover was worn smooth from years of handling. He pressed it into her hands. I started writing this in 1983. Every lesson I learned the hard way. Every mistake that almost got me killed. Every piece of wisdom worth passing on. Tessa opened it carefully. Pages filled with sketches, calculations, handwritten observations, wind drift tables, range estimation techniques. I can't take this. This is yours. It's yours now, Briggs's voice was firm. Trust what your father taught you. Trust what I taught you. You're ready for more than carrying boxes. You've always been ready. He gripped her shoulder once hard. And Tessa, whatever happens out there, whatever you have to do, your father would be proud. Don't let fear or promises stop you from being who you were trained to be. Then he walked away. The night before the mission, Tessa lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling. She thought about her parents. Her father buried at Arlington. Her mother back in Montana thinking her daughter was safe. She pulled out Briggs's notebook and flipped through it by the dim light of a battery-powered lantern. Page after page of hard-won knowledge. On the inside back cover, she found an inscription she hadn't noticed before. Tessa, you'll hit a wall. Everyone does. When you want to quit, remember the only failure is stopping before you're finished. Everything else is just a temporary setback. You've got this. You've always had this. Callahan Briggs, September 14th. Dated September 14th. 3 days before she'd volunteered for this mission. He'd known. Somehow he'd known she would end up here. Tessa closed the notebook. Outside, the desert wind picked up, carrying sand against the walls. Tomorrow, everything would change. She just didn't know how much. The Black Hawk lifted into the night sky at 0230 hours on October 12th. Tessa sat in the cargo bay, surrounded by 14 SEALs who checked their weapons with mechanical efficiency. Nobody spoke. The only sounds were the rotor blades chopping through the desert air and occasional radio chatter. She checked her gear one final time. 320 rounds of 7.62 millimeter ammunition distributed in 16 magazines. Medical trauma kit, 6 liters of water, M4 carbine-loaded safety-engaged barrel pointed down. Across from her sat Corporal Garrett Sullivan. Everyone called him Reaper. 28 years old from Montana like her, with an icy calm that never seemed to crack. His primary weapon was an M110 semi-automatic sniper system, the same rifle Briggs had been training her on. Sullivan caught her looking and nodded once. 2 people from Montana somehow ending up here. Lieutenant Porter's voice came through everyone's headsets. 5 minutes to insertion. Final checks. The SEALs moved in perfect synchronization, checking magazines, adjusting night vision mounts. These men had done this hundreds of times. 2 minutes out, the world exploded. RP, ERP, brake right. The helicopter jerked violently. Through the open door, Tessa saw streaks of light racing up from the darkness. Tracer rounds, green fingers reaching for them. This wasn't supposed to happen. The intelligence briefing said the area would be clear. Someone had gotten it wrong, fatally wrong, a sound like thunder striking metal. The helicopter shuddered. Warning lights flashed red. The smell of burning hydraulic fluid filled Tessa's nostrils. The aircraft spun. The horizon tilted at impossible angles. Tessa's head slammed against the bulkhead. Stars exploded across her vision. The ground rushed up to meet them. The pilot fought for control, pulling every trick he knew. The Black Hawk leveled at the last possible second, but the landing was brutal beyond imagination. Impact. Metal screaming against rock and sand. The aircraft bounced once, twice, then slid sideways, throwing up debris and dust. Rotor blades disintegrated, structural supports bent and snapped. Then stillness. Terrible ringing stillness. Tessa's training took over. Unbuckle harness, grab rifle, check for injuries. Her head throbbed. Blood trickled from her scalp, but she could move. The SEALs were already pouring out into the night. Lieutenant Porter dragged the unconscious pilot from his seat. The co-pilot stumbled out, bleeding but conscious. Bullets began snapping through the air, that distinctive crack of rounds passing close. Tessa stumbled out of the helicopter. The desert stretched under cold stars. Muzzle flashes sparked about 180 yards west, shouting in Pashto. The SEALs established a defensive perimeter with practice suite in Erbai. Porter was everywhere at once, positioning men, directing fire. One SEAL named Griffin had the M24OB machine gun up within seconds, pouring suppressive fire toward enemy positions. Sullivan scrambled up onto a rocky outcropping 30 feet away. He set up his M110 with efficient movements. Within seconds, the rifle spoke. Boom. A pause. Boom. Through the darkness, insurgents began dropping at 300 yards. 400. Distances where distinguishing man from shadow was nearly impossible. But through Sullivan's scope, they were clear as day. Tessa dropped to the sand and opened her supply pack. This was her job. Distribute ammunition. Keep the fighters supplied. She crawled from position to position, delivering magazines. A bullet kicked up sand 3 inches from her hand. Another passed so close to her ear, she felt the air split. But she kept moving. Do the job, don't think. Just do the job. Sullivan's rifle continued its methodical conversation. Every 8 to 10 seconds, another boom. Every time it spoke, the enemy's advance faltered. He was their lifeline. As long as that rifle kept talking, they had breathing room. Then at 0312 hours, everything changed. Sullivan shifted position to get a better angle on an insurgent machine gun nest. He exposed himself for just a moment, maybe 3 seconds. The crack of the incoming round was different, sharper, more focused. A sniper on the other side, someone who had been waiting with infinite patience. The bullet found the gap between Sullivan's shoulder and his body armor plate. The impact spun him around. He slammed against the rocks. His M110 clattered away, bouncing twice before coming to rest. Blood spread dark across his uniform. Combat medic Daniel McKay was moving before Sullivan finished falling. He covered 30 feet in 3 seconds, medical kit already in his hands. He reached Sullivan and went to work immediately. Pressure on the wound. Packing with quick clot gauze, starting an IV line. Sullivan was conscious but in shock, his face pale, breathing shallow. Can't shoot. Rifle. Lieutenant Porter's voice cut through the radio traffic. We need that gun position active. Sullivan's down. Who can shoot? Silence. The other SEALs were fully engaged. McKay was treating Sullivan. The pilots were wounded. And Tessa was a logistics specialist who counted bullets. The enemy sensed the shift immediately. They grew bolder, moving closer, their shots more accurate. The PKM machine gun nest opened fire with renewed confidence. Rounds impacted near the SEAL positions with terrifying precision. Tessa stared at the M110 lying on the rocks 30 feet away. Starlight glinted off the scope. That rifle had been controlling the battlefield. Sullivan had been protecting everyone through precision violence at extreme range. Now it sat silent. Without it, they would be overrun within minutes. A voice echoed in her memory, her father teaching her to shoot in the Montana mountains when she was 15. The rifle is just a tool, baby girl. What matters is the person behind it, whether you have the courage to use it when it counts. Another voice, her mother rain streaming down her face at Arlington. Promise me you'll never pick up a rifle again. I can't lose you the same way. And Briggs 3 days ago, if the moment comes when someone needs you to use those skills, will you hide behind a promise or will you honor what your father actually taught you? The moment had come. Tessa dropped her supply pack. Her body moved before her conscious mind caught up. She scrambled up the rocky outcropping. The rocks were sharp under her hands. She heard Porter yell something behind her, but the words didn't register. There was only the rifle, only the mission. Her hands closed around the M110. The metal was still warm from Sullivan's grip. Heavy, familiar. But this wasn't the range at FOB Griffin. This wasn't her father teaching her in the mountains. This wasn't Briggs supervising from a safe distance. This was real. This was life and death. Tessa positioned herself where Sullivan had been. The elevated position gave her a clear view. She pressed her eye to the scope. The world magnified dramatically. Individual faces 350 yards away. Bearded men with keffiyehs and AK-47s. Young men and old men. Some looked scared. Some looked determined. All of them trying to kill her and everyone she was fighting alongside. Her hands shook. The crosshairs wavered wildly. Real people were down there. Real human beings with families and histories. One of them was setting up a PKM machine gun behind a rock. If that weapon opened fire, it would tear through the sealed defensive line. Tessa centered the crosshairs on the fighter's chest. Her breath came in ragged gasps. She tried to remember everything her father had taught her. Everything Briggs had reinforced. Breathing, trigger control, follow through. She took a breath, let half of it out, held the rest. Her father's voice clear as if he were beside her. Don't think about the target as a person. Focus on the mechanics, muscle memory. You've done this 1,000 times. Her finger took up the slack on the trigger. Smooth pressure. Steady. The rifle bucked hard against her shoulder. The boom echoed across the desert. Through the scope, she watched the insurgent drop. The PKM fell silent before it ever fired. She had just killed a human being. Tessa waited for horror, for guilt, for her world to shatter. But there was only a strange numbness. And beneath that numbness, something she didn't want to examine. The immediate urgent need to find the next target. Because people were depending on her. Because the mission wasn't finished. Her hands worked the action, chambering a fresh round. The spent brass casing clinked against the rocks. A fighter was running between positions. 3 seconds of exposure. She led him to account for movement. Fired. He went down hard. The rifle became an extension of her body. Load, aim, breathe, fire. Each shot was a separate task requiring total concentration. She stopped thinking about the bigger picture. There was only the scope view and the trigger. Below her position, she heard Porter on the radio. Surprise in his voice, but also approval. "Morgan's on the gun. Someone got Morgan on the gun." She didn't respond. It didn't matter. All that mattered was the next shot. The enemy fighters realized the American sniper position was active again. They became more cautious, staying behind cover, limiting exposure. This was exactly what the SEALs needed. Breathing room. Time to reorganize. Tessa shifted focus to high-value targets. An enemy commander directing fighters from behind a disabled vehicle. Range approximately 520 yards. She adjusted her aim point slightly high for bullet drop. Held her breath. Fired. The commander dropped. The fighters scattered in confusion. Without clear leadership, their attack became disorganized. Minutes blurred together. Tessa lost count of her shots. The rifle grew hot. Sweat dripped into her eyes. Her shoulder ached from recoil. But she kept shooting, because stopping meant dying. A bullet struck the rock inches from her head. Stone fragments sprayed across her face. She felt sharp stings. Blood ran down her neck. She shifted position slightly. Kept firing. The wound didn't matter. Nothing mattered except maintaining this position. Then she heard the most beautiful sound imaginable. The whoop, whoop, whoop of helicopter rotors. 2 Apache gunships streaked across the sky like avenging angels. Their presence changed everything instantly. The Apaches opened fire with devastating effect. 30mm chain guns. Hydra rockets exploding among insurgent positions. The enemy attack collapsed. Fighters scattered and ran. It was over. Tessa lowered the rifle. Her entire body began trembling with adrenaline crash. Every muscle felt like water. She slumped against the rocks, suddenly aware of everything. The blood on her face. The bruise blooming on her shoulder. The ringing in her ears. The strange numbness in her chest where emotions should be. Lieutenant Porter climbed up to her position. His face was covered in dust and sweat. Blood stained his uniform. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You hit!" His voice was hoarse from shouting orders. Tessa wiped blood from her face with the back of her hand. "Still holding together, sir." He nodded slowly. "You gave us the breathing room we needed. Sullivan owes you his life." He paused. "We all do." "That was exceptional work, Morgan." That was all he said. But the weight behind those words was enormous. He started climbing down, stopped halfway, looked back. Sullivan's stable. McKay got him patched. Medevac's inbound. He paused again. "You saved lives tonight, Morgan. Don't forget that." Tessa sat alone on the rocks with Sullivan's rifle across her lap. Dawn was breaking in the east, the sky shifting from black to deep blue to orange, beautiful and terrible at the same time. She had killed people tonight, At least 8 that she could confirm. Maybe more. Young men, old men, fighters who probably believed they were defending their homeland. She waited for the guilt to hit, the horror, the moral crisis, but of all she felt was exhausted numbness. And underneath that, something else. Satisfaction. The knowledge that she'd performed under extreme pressure, that her shots had been clean and precise, that she'd done exactly what needed doing. Was that wrong? Was she supposed to feel worse about it? The extraction helicopters came loud and fast, medevac birds with red crosses, security team establishing perimeter. Sullivan went first, on a stretcher, IV bags hanging from poles. McKay walking alongside, still giving instructions. The SEAL sniper's face was pale from blood loss, but he was conscious. As they carried him past, he turned his head and caught Tessa's eye. He didn't say anything, just nodded once. Acknowledgement between two snipers, recognition of what she'd done. Then McKay stopped beside her, looked at her face. The blood, the stone cuts, the 1,000-yard stare. "You all right, Morgan?" She nodded. "Think so." "You just did something most people couldn't do. You know that, right?" Tessa didn't respond. McKay studied her for a moment. "Get yourself checked by the docs when we get back. That's a nasty concussion, and probably some PTSD waiting to surface." He limped toward the helicopter. "Turn back once more. Also, what you did tonight, that's going to change everything. For you. For how people see you. Just be ready for that." The flight back to FOB Griffin took 20 minutes. Tessa sat staring out the open door. The battlefield receded below. Bodies scattered across the sand, smoke rising from destroyed positions, brass casings glinting in early sunlight, evidence of violence that would be covered by desert sand within days. She thought about the faces she'd seen through the scope, wondered if they had families, children, people who would grieve them. Then she pushed those thoughts away. That path led to madness, to paralysis. Some experiences separated you from the people you loved, created chasms that couldn't be crossed with words. She was alone with this, truly alone. Back at FOB Griffin, everything happened in a blur. Medical processing, doctors shining lights in her eyes, 8 stitches in her cheek where stone fragments had cut, 12 more in her scalp, anti-nausea medication for the concussion, orders for 48 hours rest. Tessa went to her bunk and lay down fully clothed, stared at the ceiling while her mind replayed every shot. Face number 1, young man maybe 20 setting up the PKM center mass. Clean kill. Face number 2, runner between positions. Mid-30s, led him perfectly, dropped mid-stride. Face number 3, the commander, gray beard, authority in his posture. Eliminated and the attack collapsed. 8 confirmed. Maybe more. Each face burned into her memory. Sleep wouldn't come. Her body was exhausted, but her mind raced. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the scope view, crosshairs settling on human targets. At 0400, she gave up, walked to the shower facility, stood under scalding water until her skin turned red, scrubbed at dried blood, watched pink water swirl down the drain. But she still didn't feel clean. The mess hall was nearly empty at 0530. Tessa poured coffee that tasted like battery acid, sat at a corner table watching the sunrise. Other soldiers filtered in gradually. Some glanced at her. Word had spread about the logistics specialist who became a sniper. She was no longer invisible. Footsteps approached. She looked up and saw Master Sergeant Briggs. He sat down heavily, bad legs stretched out. His weathered face showed deep concern. "How you holding up, kid?" Tessa shrugged. "I'm fine." "That's a lie. Nobody's fine after their first combat, not ever." They sat in silence for a while. Finally, Briggs spoke. "Grenada, 1983. I was 37. First time I killed someone through a scope." Tessa looked at him. He was staring at his coffee. "Insurgent at 600 yards. Clear shot. I pulled the trigger and he dropped." Briggs's jaw tightened. "Then I threw up behind my position. Heaved my guts out while my spotter pretended not to notice. Nightmares for months. His face on repeat. Wondering if he had kids. If his wife would cry." He looked up. His eyes were wet. "The guilt nearly broke me." Tessa felt something loosen in her chest. "Does it get easier?" "No, it never gets easier, but you learn to carry the weight better. You learn to put those faces in a box and only open it when you can handle it." He leaned forward. "Here's what matters. You did the right thing for the right reasons. Those men were trying to kill your team. You protected them. That's not murder. That's war." "I keep seeing them," Tessa whispered. "Every time I close my eyes. You will for a long time, maybe forever. Briggs gripped her hand. But you're still you. You're still the girl from Montana who takes pride in doing things right. What you did last night doesn't erase that. It adds to it. He pulled back. I lost my daughter because I never learned to process this. Never talked about it. Kept it locked inside until it poisoned everything. His voice cracked. Don't make my mistakes, Tessa. Don't let this consume you. Tears ran down his weathered cheeks. Teaching you has been the closest thing to redemption I'll ever get. Watching you discover what you're capable of. That matters to me more than you'll ever know. Tessa felt her own eyes filling. I almost got people killed. I froze for a second before I picked up that rifle. But you didn't freeze long. You acted. And that action saved Sullivan's life, saved McKay, saved Porter and his entire team. Briggs's voice was fierce. 1 second of hesitation is human. What matters is what you did after. They sat together as the sun climbed higher. 3 days later, Lieutenant Porter requested a formal meeting. Tessa reported to his office at 1400 hours. Porter gestured for her to sit. How are you healing up? Stitches itch. Concussions better. Cleared for duty. He nodded, shuffled papers, then looked at her directly. I'm recommending you for the Bronze Star with Valor device. Your actions saved multiple lives. Without someone manning that sniper position after Sullivan went down, we'd have been overrun. Tessa started to protest, but he held up a hand. I've written hundreds of award citations. I know what merits recognition. What you did was exceptional. Period. He leaned back. But that's not why I called you here. I've been reviewing your training records. Your evaluations from Master Sergeant Briggs. He looked at her. You have natural talent as a marksman. Significant talent. The kind that shouldn't be wasted counting supplies. Have you ever considered transferring to a combat specialty, sniper school, precision marksman courses? I've thought about it, but I like logistics. It's important work. You're adequate at logistics. You're exceptional at shooting. Porter's voice was firm. Combat doesn't care about your job title. When the situation demands action, you either step up or people die. You stepped up. That shows character. He set down the folder. I'll support whatever decision you make, but I want you to really think about this. Actual consideration of what you're capable of. How much time do I have to decide? 1 week after that, I need an answer. That evening, Tessa found Briggs at the shooting range. He was cleaning weapons. Looked up when she approached. Porter made you the offer. It wasn't a question. How'd you know? Because I recommended you. Told him you were top 5% of any shooter I'd trained in 25 years. He set down the cleaning rod. What did you tell him? That I needed time to think. And what are you thinking? Tessa sat beside him. I'm scared. What if I can't handle sniper school? What if I fail? You already proved you can handle the worst moment. School is just school. You've been operating under fire. Everything else is easier by comparison. And what if I become someone who kills without feeling it? What if I lose myself? Briggs's expression softened. That's actually a good sign. Means you still have your humanity. The day you stop worrying about that is the day you've actually lost yourself. He was quiet for a moment. Listen carefully. You will carry those faces forever. That's the price, but you also carry the knowledge that you saved Sullivan's life, McKay's life, Porter and his entire team. His voice was fierce. Those men have families too. Kids who still have fathers because of what you did. That matters. Tessa felt something shift inside her chest, a weight settling into place. I want to do this. I want to go to sniper school. I want to develop this capability. Briggs smiled, first genuine smile she'd seen from him. Then do it, and don't look back. The next morning, Tessa walked into Porter's office. I want sniper school, sir, if the offer still stands. Porter's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Already started the paperwork. Had a feeling you'd make the right choice. Army sniper school at Fort Benning. 7 weeks, one of the highest failure rates in the military. I understand, sir. This isn't a hobby. This is a complete career change. You'll be taking life regularly, carrying weight most people can't imagine. There's no going back once you commit. Tessa met his eyes steadily. I'm already carrying the weight, sir. Might as well learn to carry it properly. He nodded slowly. Report date is December 16th. That gives you 2 months to prepare. I suggest you use them. Fort Benning, Georgia hit Tessa like a shock to the system. After months in the Afghan desert, the humidity felt like breathing through wet wool. Rain fell in cold sheets. Everything was green and dense and alien. She reported on December 16th carrying a single duffel bag in Briggs's leather notebook. 26 students stood in formation outside the sniper school headquarters. Most were men, infantry veterans with multiple deployments, rangers with combat patches, Marines carved from granite. Two other women stood in the formation, one tall and angular with short blonde hair, the other compact and muscular. They didn't acknowledge each other. Nobody acknowledged anybody. Everyone sizing up the competition. A man emerged from the headquarters building, mid-40s, scarred face with a nose that had been broken multiple times, missing his left pinky finger. His eyes were hard and evaluative. "I am Sergeant First Class Declan Harrow. I will be your lead instructor for the next 7 weeks." His voice carried across the formation without shouting. "I don't give a damn about your background, your rank, or your gender. You are all equally worthless until you prove otherwise through performance." He paced along the formation. "This course has a 70% failure rate. Most of you will wash out. That's not a threat. It's a statistical fact." He resumed pacing. "You will be pushed past your limits, sleep-deprived, underfed, tested in ways that will break your body and your mind. The question is whether you have the will to continue when every fiber of your being wants to quit." He stopped at center. "There are no participation trophies here. No credit for trying. You either meet the standard or you fail. Welcome to hell." The first week focused on marksmanship fundamentals. 300-yard qualification on day 1, 8 out of 10 hits minimum to continue. Tessa watched 3 students fail immediately. Their shots scattered across targets in patterns that revealed fundamental flaws. They were recycled to remedial training. Tessa shot perfect, 10 out of 10. The blonde female student also shot perfect. They made eye contact for the first time. Brief acknowledgement. Harrow walked the line checking targets. He paused at Tessa's, studied the tight grouping, looked at her face with his healing scar. He said nothing, just moved on. But she saw recognition in his eyes. By the 3rd week, they'd moved to advanced fieldcraft, constructing ghillie suits from burlap and natural vegetation. Tessa's methodical nature served her well. She measured thread spacing with precision, matched colors exactly to Georgia vegetation. Harrow examined her work. "This looks like something from a museum." "Well done, Morgan." First praise she'd heard from him, then came the stalking exercise. The moment where confidence turned to hubris. The objective seemed straightforward. Move 150 meters through wooded terrain toward 2 walker instructors actively searching for students. Reach firing position undetected. Time limit 3 hours. Tessa had shot perfect all week, constructed the best ghillie suit, proven herself under actual combat conditions. This exercise felt trivial by comparison. She moved too fast, impatient to demonstrate skill, confident that natural talent would carry her through. At 100 meters, a walker blew his whistle. Sharp, loud, final. Busted stand-up student. Tessa stood. Mud and leaves fell from her ghillie suit. Her face burned with humiliation. The walker approached. Older. Gray hair. Eyes that had seen everything. "What's your name?" "Morgan, Sergeant." "Well, Morgan, you just got yourself and your entire team killed. Your impatience, your overconfidence, your failure to respect fundamentals." He pointed back toward the start line. "Walk back and think about what you did wrong." The walk of shame took forever. Other students watched from concealment. She felt their judgment. The combat veteran who couldn't handle a basic stalking exercise. Harrow waited at the start line. His expression was worse than anger. It was disappointment. "What happened out there, Morgan?" "I moved too fast, Sergeant First Class. I was overconfident." "Yes, you were. Combat gave you a false sense of capability. You think because you performed once under fire, you've mastered fundamentals. You haven't. You got lucky, and luck runs out." A student approached Tessa at breakfast the next morning. Early 30s, infantry veteran, lean and weathered with kind eyes. "Saw you get walked yesterday. I'm Mason Wright. Everyone calls me Brick. Happened to me on my first attempt too. Happens to most people." "How'd you pass the retest?" "Slowed down, trusted the process. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Rushing gets you killed, or in this case, walked." Over the next 3 days, Tessa practiced obsessively. Spent 8 hours in the woods moving at glacial pace. Lay motionless in underbrush while mosquitoes covered every exposed inch of skin. Briggs's words echoed in her memory. "Patience defeats panic." The retest came on a cold January morning. Same course, same walkers, different Tessa. She took 2 hours and 40 minutes to cover 150 meters. Moved 6 inches at a time at her slowest points. Froze when walkers passed within 10 feet. became part of the forest rather than something moving through it. She reached the firing position undetected. Set up behind her rifle, acquired the target. Perfect. Harrow was waiting at extraction. He looked at her differently now. Better, much better. You learned the lesson. Week 5 brought the critical qualification. 10 shots, 10 different scenarios. Urban environments, moving targets, variable distances and wind, must hit 8 out of 10 minimum to continue. Tessa approached the firing line feeling prepared, confident but not overconfident. Shot 1, hit clean. Shot 2, hit. Shot 3, miss. Misjudged wind through a building gap. Bullet went 6 inches right. She felt panic rising. Pushed it down, breathed, refocused. Shot 4, hit. Shot 5, miss. Flinched on trigger. Pulled instead of squeezed. Rookie mistake. Panic grew stronger. 2 misses already, could only afford 1 more. Shot 6, miss. Complete mental blank. Forgot to compensate for elevation. Bullet struck 2 feet low. 3 misses. 7 out of 10. Failure. Tessa lowered the rifle feeling numb. Around her, other students finished. Brick shot 9 out of 10. The blonde female student shot perfect again. But Tessa had failed. Harrow approached. Didn't yell, didn't curse. Just looked at her with devastating disappointment. See me after formation, Morgan. The rest of the day passed in a fog, classes on range estimation, practical exercises. Tessa went through the motions, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying those 3 missed shots, understanding that the problem wasn't technical, it was mental. She choked under pressure. After formation, she reported to Harrow's office. He gestured for her to sit. You want to tell me what happened out there? I choked Sergeant First Class, lost focus, made mistakes I shouldn't make. Why you've performed under actual combat conditions. You've killed enemy fighters while bullets were flying at you. Why did a simple qualification break you? Tessa didn't have an answer, or rather she had one but didn't want to admit it. I don't know, Sergeant First Class. Yes, you do. He leaned forward. You're exhausted, sleep-deprived, undernourished. Your body is breaking down and your mind is following. This is exactly what the course is designed to do. Find your breaking point. See if you quit or push through. He stood. You have 1 retest of opportunity tomorrow. Same qualification. If you fail again, you are recycled. Might join the next class, might not. Up to you to decide if you have what it takes. Tessa left his office feeling hollow. Walked back to the barracks in cold rain. She sat on her bunk and stared at the wall. She could quit. Just walk away. Go back to logistics and count bullets and live a safe, predictable life. Nobody would blame her. Sniper School defeated better soldiers than her every single week. At 2100 hours, she pulled out Briggs's notebook, flipped through pages of wisdom accumulated over 25 years. On the inside back cover, she found the inscription she'd read a dozen times. But tonight, the words hit different. Tessa, you'll hit a wall. Everyone does. When you want to quit, remember the only failure is stopping before you're finished. Everything else is just a temporary setback. You've got this. You have always had this. Callahan Briggs. He'd known before she'd even left Afghanistan. He'd known she would reach this moment, this crisis point where quitting seemed easier than continuing. And he'd left her this message, this reminder that failure was only permanent if she chose to make it so. Tessa stood, grabbed her rifle case, walked out into the rain toward the night range. The range safety wasn't expecting anyone, but he unlocked the facility without question. She spent 2 hours in darkness running dry fire drills. No ammunition, just mechanics. Breathing, trigger press, follow through, over and over until the movements felt automatic again, until her mind quieted and her body remembered what it knew. At 01:30, she returned to the barracks, slept for 3 hours, best sleep she'd had in days. The retest qualification happened at 0800, same course, same scenarios, different Tessa. She approached it like she'd approached that stalking retest. Slow, methodical, no rushing, no panic. Just fundamentals executed with precision. Shot 1, hit. Shot 2, hit. Shot 3, hit. Compensated properly for wind this time. Shot 4, hit. Shot 5, hit. Smooth trigger press. No flinch. Shot 6, hit. Perfect elevation, compensation. She continued through all 10 shots. 10 hits, perfect score. Harrow examined her target, looked at her face, nodded once. There's the shooter I expected. Don't disappear again. February 8th arrived cold and clear. Graduation day. 26 students had started. 9 stood in formation to receive their sniper tabs. 65% failure rate, higher than average. This had been a particularly brutal class. Tessa stood at attention as the commander approached. He pinned the tab to her uniform, small piece of cloth that represented 7 weeks of suffering, hundreds of hours of training, pushing past every limit she thought she had. Congratulations, Specialist Morgan. You are now a qualified United States Army sniper. Lieutenant Porter had flown from California specifically for her graduation. He handed her a challenge coin, seal trident on one side. You saved Sullivan's life. Mine. Everyone's. That makes you family. Always. Then a familiar voice called from behind. Heard someone graduated sniper school. Tessa turned. Corporal Garrett Sullivan stood in dress uniform, left arm still in a sling but standing tall. The Montana sniper who'd been hit in Operation Valkyrie, whose rifle she'd picked up. Reaper, I didn't know you'd come. Took a while to track you down. Wanted to say thank you in person. You gave me a chance to see my kids grow up. That matters more than you know. They shook hands. 2 snipers, Montana-born, forged in the same fire. You earned this. Sullivan handed her something. His M110 scope ring, battle-scarred metal. Carried this through 3 deployments. Figure you earned the right to carry it forward. Tessa's throat tightened. I can't take this. Already got a new one. Besides, every time you look through a scope, you'll remember. We hold the line, all of us. He saluted once, then walked away. That evening, Tessa called Afghanistan on a satellite phone. It took 15 minutes to get connected to FOB Griffin, another 10 to locate Briggs. When his gravelly voice finally came through, she felt tears burning. Sergeant Briggs Morgan, that's you, kid. Just wanted to let you know I graduated. 9 out of 26 made it. I was one of them. Silence on the line. Then his voice came back thick with emotion. Told you so. Knew you had it. I'm proud of you, Tessa. He paused. I almost quit, Sergeant. Week 5, I was ready to walk away. But you didn't. That's what matters. You chose to stay. Now go save some lives. That's an order. Yes, Sergeant. And Sergeant, thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. Thank you for letting me be part of this, for giving me a chance to do it right with someone. His voice cracked. They talked for another 10 minutes. Then static consumed the connection and he was gone. Tessa received deployment orders the next day. 3rd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. Precision marksman attached to direct action teams. Deploy date April 2014. Back to Afghanistan. She was going home. April through September passed in a blur of missions. Overwatch positions during raids. Counter-sniper operations. Protecting teams from concealment. Each mission reinforced what she'd learned. Patience, precision, purpose. She carried Briggs's notebook on every operation, added her own observations, her own lessons learned, began writing wisdom to pass forward someday. Then in October, an email arrived that shattered everything. October 12, 2014. Exactly 1 year after Operation Valkyrie. The email came from Fort Benning Personnel Office. Official notification. Master Sergeant Callahan Briggs had died. Heart attack in his sleep. October 12th, age 68. No family to notify. Tessa was listed as emergency contact. She sat in her bunk holding the printed email. Read it 5 times. Felt the grief settle like a physical weight in her chest. Briggs was gone. The man who'd believed in her. Who'd given her permission to be more than she thought she could be. Who'd seen her as the daughter he'd lost. She requested emergency leave. Denied. Active deployment. Mission-critical personnel couldn't be spared. Instead, she wrote him a letter. 10 pages of everything she wanted to say. Everything he'd meant. How he'd changed her life. How she carried his lessons every single day. How she thought of him as the father figure her own father would have wanted for her. She burned the letter in a trash can outside her bunk. Watched the pages curl and blacken. Sent the smoke up to wherever he was. Hoped somehow he knew. She kept his notebook. Carried it on every mission. The leather cover growing more worn with each deployment. A physical connection to the man who changed everything. December brought her unit rotation back to FOB Griffin for resupply and rest. The base had changed. New faces, new buildings, but the memorial wall remained. She found Briggs's name on a new brass plaque. Master Sergeant Callahan Briggs. 25 years of service. Grenada, Panama, Desert Storm. Tessa stood at attention, saluted formally. whispered words only he would hear. I made you proud, Sergeant. I'm holding the line, just like you taught me. January 2015 brought new orders. Assistant instructor for basic marksmanship, training new soldiers, passing forward the knowledge that had been given to her. Her first class included a nervous logistics specialist from Tennessee, Private Meadow Sutton, 22 years old, uncertain, capable of more than she knew. Tessa handed her an M4 carbine. Let's see what you've got. Meadows' first grouping was tight, natural talent visible immediately. She looked up surprised. I didn't know I could do that. Most people don't know what they're capable of until circumstances demand it. Tessa smiled, remembering herself 2 years ago. You're different. Natural shooter. That's rare. Over the following weeks, Tessa worked with Meadow, saw the same progression she'd experienced. Uncertainty becoming confidence, fear becoming purpose. A logistics specialist discovering she could be more. One evening after training, Tessa gave Meadow a small notebook. New one, leather cover. Inside, she'd written lessons from Briggs's notebook and lessons from her own experience. Wind tables, range calculations, observations about breath control and trigger discipline. The cover inscription read, "Patience defeats panic. Everyone holds the line when needed." Meadow opened it carefully, flipped through pages filled with a handwritten wisdom. Her eyes widened as she recognized what she was holding. Sergeant Morgan, I don't understand. Why me? Because 2 years ago, someone saw potential in me I didn't see in myself. Gave me permission to be more than I thought possible. Now I'm giving you that same permission. Meadow's eyes glistened. What if I'm not ready? Nobody's ready. You just become ready by doing. Tessa started to walk away. Stopped. Oh, and Meadow, when you get to sniper school, and you will, remember patience defeats panic. She left Meadow standing there clutching the notebook with reverent care. That evening, Tessa sat in her quarters and did something she'd been avoiding for 2 years. She called home. Her mother answered on the third ring. Tessa, is that you? Are you okay? I'm fine, Mom. I needed to talk to you. What's wrong? Did something happen? Tessa took a deep breath. I need to tell you something I should have told you a long time ago. She told her mother everything, about finding Briggs at the shooting range, about the training, about Operation Valkyrie and picking up Sullivan's rifle, about breaking the promise she'd made at her father's funeral, about sniper school and becoming what her father had trained her to be. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then her mother spoke, her voice thick with tears. I've known for a while. Lieutenant Porter sent me a letter after Operation Valkyrie, told me what you did, asked if I wanted him to stop you from going to sniper school. Tessa felt her world tilt. What did you tell him? I told him that I was terrified, that I'd spent every day since your father's funeral afraid I'd lose you the same way. Her mother paused. But I also told him that your father would have been furious with me for making you promise not to use what he taught you, that I'd let my fear turn his gift into a burden. She took a shaky breath. I told him to let you choose, and that whatever you chose, I would support you. Tessa felt tears streaming down her face. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I broke my promise. Don't be sorry, baby. You didn't break a promise. You honored your father's memory. You became exactly who he raised you to be. Her mother was crying now, too. I'm proud of you, Tessa. Your father would be so proud of you. I should have said that 2 years ago. I'm sorry it took me this long. They talked for another hour, about her father, about Briggs, about the weight of carrying what they'd both taught her, about the lives she'd saved and the legacy she was building. When Tessa finally hung up, she felt lighter than she had in years. The next day, she submitted paperwork for a long overdue trip home. The Army approved 2 weeks leave in March. She would visit her father's grave at Arlington, tell him everything that had happened, everything she'd become. But first, she had students to train, a legacy to pass forward. 3 months later, Tessa stood at her father's grave. Staff Sergeant Michael Morgan, born 1969, died 2007. Beloved husband and father. She placed Sullivan's scope ring on the headstone, battle-scarred metal catching the March sunlight. I used both hands, Dad, just like you taught me. I broke Mom's promise, but I think I kept yours. She stood there for a long time, feeling the weight of everything she carried, the faces of the men she'd killed, the lives of the men she'd saved, the wisdom of the mentor who'd believed in her, the love of the father who'd given her the skills, the forgiveness of the mother who'd finally understood. It was all connected, all part of the same story. A story that didn't end here. Back at FOB Griffin, the training program was expanding. What had started as Briggs's optional evening sessions had grown into a formal curriculum. Integrated combat skills, weapons proficiency for support personnel, medical training for combat arms. The idea that every soldier should have skills beyond their primary specialty. Tessa taught 3 classes a week now. 47 students had gone through the program in the past 6 months. 12 had gone on to sniper school. All 12 had graduated. 0 combat deaths in units where support personnel had cross-trained in weapons skills. The ripple effects were spreading beyond FOB Griffin. 3 other bases had requested the curriculum. The Army was considering making it standard for all logistics and support personnel. One evening in late May, Tessa sat alone watching the sunset over the desert. Same mountains, same sky that had witnessed her transformation from supply sergeant to sniper. She thought about the path that had brought her here. Helicopter crash, Sullivan falling, the choice to pick up that rifle. Every moment of fear and doubt and determination. She wasn't counting bullets anymore. She was making every single one count. Briggs had given her permission to discover her potential. Now she was giving that same permission to others. The legacy didn't end. It continued. Passed from teacher to student, generation to generation, each one carrying the weight and the wisdom forward. Her father had taught her steady hands could hold both a rifle and a life worth living. Briggs had taught her when to use each. Now she was teaching the next generation. Because the mission wasn't about her, it was about everyone who came after. The sun touched the horizon, painted the sky orange and gold, beautiful and terrible at the same time, like war, like life, like everything worth doing. Tessa stood, stretched, felt Briggs's notebook in her cargo pocket, felt Sullivan's replacement scope ring on the chain around her neck, felt the weight of the faces she carried, the lives she'd taken and the lives she'd saved, the person she'd been and the person she'd become. She had held the line when the moment demanded it, and she would continue holding it, because that's what warriors did, what guardians did, what people who refused to quit did. The desert wind picked up, carried sand and memories. Tessa turned and walked back toward the barracks. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new students, new opportunities to pass forward what had been given to her. But tonight she simply carried the gratitude. For a father who'd believed in her enough to teach her. For a mentor who'd believed in her enough to push her. For a mother who'd believed in her enough to let her go. For circumstances that had revealed her. For the courage to become something she never imagined. She was Tessa Morgan, former logistics specialist, combat sniper, instructor, guardian, daughter of 2 fathers, both gone now, both living on in what she'd become, and her war was just beginning.